We're now holding on Amud Yutes, the paragraph beginning about Nimshon is a Yuvun the Maila Be'eses Firis Datzilis. So we just explained how there is a major distinction between the Eiris and Kalim according to the Rakanti. And we first of all explained how that resolves the issue of how there's no shinoi in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because the shinoi is mitzad the Kalim, the shinoi is not mitzad the Eir. And we quoted and we brought extensively from the Maimah, which is the beer on Eilos Tamid from Tov Kuf Samach Tes. And I told you to learn the second Maimah of the Hemshech Rosh Hashanah of Tov Reish Tzadik Gimel. In Tov Reish Tzadik Gimel, there's two Maimarim, the Hemshech Rosh Hashanah, which was published in Kontreisim Aleph. And then the second Maimah, you have a very geshmaka biur of the Teichen over here. And that being how there seems to be conflicting ideas about Atzilus. On the one hand, we say it's Bli Ma, say it's Bli Gvul, and on the other hand, we say it's Esa, V'lei Teisha, Esa, V'lei Echad Asar. And it explains, as we do here, that these distinctions, this can be explained by saying that the Inyanim, which are Bli Ma, Bli Muhos, Bli Metzias, that's a reference to the Oy, which is not Metziah at all. And the Hagbola and the Eschalkus, that is a reference to the Kalim. Okay. And we brought an example from Moshe Rabbeinu, the way Atzilus Ruchi Shal Moshe Rabbeinu on the Shivas Kalim. You have this interesting phenomenon that the Eir of Moshe, which goes into the Kalim of the Sekanim, on the one hand, his taka becomes Mugbal. They don't become Moshe Rabbeinu, but they do become thoroughly transformed and have a capability and a capacity above and beyond their station, because they have the Ruchi Shal Moshe, and that indicates that there isn't really any shinui in the Eir which is mislabish in the Kalim. That is the point I wanted to make. That's what we're going to say now. That the Eir of the Esesphiris is a ha'ara from the Atmas HaMaitzel. It's a leimar. Eir ha'meir shemispashit me'ha'maitzel b'yoytze l'chutz ke'inyam v'yetzel min ha'ruach shal Moshe. So similar to the idea of the ha'ara of Moshe Rabbeinu's Keach HaNevuah, which rested on the Zekanim, similarly, a ha'ara is mispashit from the Atmas HaMaitzel into and onto the Kalim of Atzilus. What is Eira Chachma? The function of the Eira Chachma is to facilitate the Metzias HaChachma. Just like the Ruach of Moshe was revealed to each and every single one of the Zekanim, Lefi Kli Hasagosam. But at the same time, Etzem Ha'ara it retained its identity and its superiority as the Inyan of Moshe. You have this Ha'ara, which is Nimshach Min HaMaitzel, to do something very specific. Dafka these Esesphiris, these Es are not 9 and not 11. But Eisha Niglab Esesphiris, Hu HaNikra Esesphiris, Blima. This Ha'ara, which is Nimshach from the Matzil, is what we call Esesphiris when we're referring to the Esesphiris Blima, the Inyan Blima Hus, or Metzias, Esesphiris Adain. They don't have Esesphiris in these areas. This Ha'ara, which is Nimshach, doesn't have the Hakbolis and the Eschalkus that comes from Esesphiris. But Gufa Shal Metzias HaNetzel Me'aris HaMatzil Heina Esesphiris. And the impact of those iris, is to facilitate the Metzias of the Esesphiris. V'hein hanikroim kelim, and that Metzias of the Esesphiris, those are called kelim. The kelim la'oiris, dainu hamakbilim as ha'oiris hanimshachim min ha'atzmus liyos miskalim be'eze metzias tovama. They are the means by which the oir is able to be poyel. V'hu shekol kli lefi mohusa magbil is ha'oir ha'poshut sheyinase b'tzmuna v'toya aderech moshel ha'achiyis eisei mohusa kli. So the function of the kelim is to contain the oir, which inherently is poshut, so that it should be able to have an identity and a function, such as chachma, such as chesed, all based on the dimensions and the characteristics of the kli. What do you mean by eira chachma? We mean the chayas of the kli ha-chachma. Chen eira chesed, shu chayas ha-chesed. The eir is not chachma, and the eir is not chesed. It's the chayas of chachma and the chayas of chesed. Aber eir mitzad atzmai, gam kumoisho b'seich hakli. This eir, not just before it's mislabish in the kli, even whilst it's b'seich hakli, hari mishtavel ha'atzmus ha'maitzel v'posh b'tachlis. It's still comparable to its origin. The atzmus ha'maitzel is still an eir which is me'ein ha'moir, and it's still posh b'tachlis just like the moir. Ella, difference is now it's mechaya es hakli ha'chachma v'chesed chlikana. The function of the eir is to be mechaya the kli. So there's for sure a difference between the eir ha'chachma. What is the difference going to be between the eir ha'chachma and the eir ha'chesed? It's going to for sure be different, because in the eir ha'chachma there's a greater gilui. The kli ha'chachma is able to be makabel more of an eir than the kli ha'chesed. It's more mitzumsum in chesed, and as they vita in all their spheres. So the eir is poshut, but the eir is also lefiarech the kli. It's machaya the kli, so it's more of a ha'ara. The ha'ara is not so mitzumsum, but whatever. Even when we're going to reach malchus ta'atzilus, the eir hamalchus is pasha b'tachas apshitas. Umov mikol anal. Mashkosu shakli magbilis ha'eir. So when we're talking about hagbolas ha'eir, ein hakavona hagbola mamish be'etzem ha'eir. The etzem ha'eir is not mukbel at all. Shari pasha b'tachlis, gam shu b'zich hakli. Ela shu mechaya es hakli lefi mohusa. The hagbola is that it will be magbil. The kli will be magbil this eir lefi mohusa. V'lachin nikra os eira chachma or eira chesed mipnei shemachaya chachma e chesed. So that's an important distinction. To not think of eira chachma as the eir which is chachma. It's the eir which is mechaya kli ha-chachma. The eir which is mechaya kli ha-chesed. And that is the hagbola which the kli imposes on this eir. That it activates the kli. It activates the kli. The kli mitzad atzmai is not poyel. Only the Eibishter is poyel. The ha'ara from atzmus ha'maitzel is poyel. The kli is not poyel. The kli is not active. Comes along the eir and it activates the kli. So the nimtze lefize muvam inyan b'chol kareinu elav. Davke el atzmus ein seif she yumshach mimenu eir v'shefel esfiras ha'chesed aderech moshel. When we talk about b'chol kareinu elav, that we have to daven davke to the Eibishter and not to the spheres, is because there's no such thing as spheres without the atzmus ein seif being nimshach into that kli to be poil. There's no pa'ulas ha'chesed. There's no kli ha'chesed. There's no functioning kli ha'chesed. The only way kli ha'chesed functions is when there's chayas from atzmus ha'matzil. Sheyumshach b'chinas chesed lamata yidei kli ha'chesed. In order to get the kindness and the benevolence from Hashem, the kli ha'chesed has to be active. And the activation is from the eir. Because the ein is shinui be'etzem ha'eir shu posha b'tachas apshitas. But notwithstanding all of that activity, it doesn't cause a shinui in the eir itself. The eir remains beyond those characteristics, and the eir does not become nitfas, identified with the inyan of chachma or chesed or whatever the sphere is going to be. To be etzem atzmusui hu mushlu meged hasfiris chumi. Because fundamentally this oir is out of the question for it to have any shaykhs to such a thing. So moving the fiyah now, mashakosa Rav Menachem Rekanti, but moshel kamelech shetzivel avodav. Why the moshel the Rekanti works? V'hein oisim b'koichi, because they do what they want, but what do they do it with? They do it with his koyach. The koyach of the melech, which the avodim are able to be poil. Nimshal l'maylu ha'tzilus ha'sfirus me'era ma'atzel v'hu mashpia ba'akelim oy b'chayas v'al yidei ha'kelim nishpil ha'matze liful ba'nivroim. Kol ze einish nubatz musay over era mispash mimenu chulikana. Toif, yeah? By mashkos b'irazu pashat bolok, bibi ma'im ha'zoyesh, chirani menavosh, kosa b'inyin eiris v'kelim datzilus gamki, mashkos b'biyah da eiris tom danal. If you look over there, has a similar beer in the Mittler Rebbe's beer Azayar. He has a similar beer to what's brought there in the Maimon that we've just brought above. So we can tie in what I've said here to explain the Maimon of the Mittler Rebbe over there. Fine. Now maybe Moshe Mimayim Bekli to Kamei Him Ben Nahar Him Bligvul gives a moshel over there about mayim in a kli. But whilst the water is in the river, it's kilu bligvul, relatively speaking. How are you going to drink from the river? But once you gather the water in a cup, or in a barrel, or whatever you're going to contain the water in, then a cistern, then you can drink, then you can benefit from it. The nimshal from that moshel is that the way is l'mayla me'atzilus is bligable, and even the eir afterwards is also bligable. B'inyan blima u'memela ein l'fiyad ha'cha'ilim is v'ani v'rayim. But on the kasha nigbul b'kli. But when this eir, which is be'etzim bligable, is contained in a kli, then you can benefit from it. Mashkos b'pad shah now pick down moshel amayim b'yitztak l'chayr gan l'fi mashkos ksavnu kan ozu b'tmunas b'toya b'chinas chachma b'akli magala b'chinas eir ha'chachma nivroim. Okay. That's the end of the first question. First question, the Pardes, the Hazan Rachman Rekanti, how isn't there a shinui? How does this overcome the issue of a shinui? So he explains, shinui is in the kelim, and it doesn't affect the eir. Say that. And when we daven, the ikka is that you have to daven to the Eibishter, because the kli is kagarzim biyad and is unable to do anything, and is function fundamentally an inanimate object, and without the eir has no chayas and has no activity. Say the yeah. Toif. Oid hikshav pardish. So the Pardes now asks another question. But fi das Rav Nachman Rekanti. When we talk about Atzilus, we mean Eiris. And when we talk about Spheres, we mean Kalim. Imkein haru yideya chas v'shalom b'yideya shechutz la'atzmusi chas v'shalom. So when the Eir, which is Atzilus, is mislabish in the Kli, it's suggesting that the Eibishter is yideya b'yideya shechutz la'atzmusi. Where is the Pu'ulas HaYediyah? Pu'ulas HaYediyah is in the Kli. Right? Chayes HaKli Taka comes from the Eir. But the Pu'ulas Dava, the specific Pu'ula, and the distinct Pu'ula, from one Sphira to another Sphira, is in the Kalim. If the Kalim are so fundamentally different to the Eiris, and the Eir doesn't have is Poshut, meaning that there's no Yediyah in the Eir, the Chayra. How is it Yediyah? Is Yediyah but Dover Shechutz that's Musay, because the Kalim are not nishtalshel like the Eir is nishtalshel. This is unfathomable. You can't Chas v'Shalom say such a thing. But Chas v'Shalom shezayih kavanah Rav Nachman Kanti yunsha. And it's would dare to think that the Rekanti would dare to say that the idea of the Eibush is the idea of Shechutz Musay, but it seems mashma from what he's saying that the Pu'ulas HaYediyah is something that exists and is performed outside of the Elikus, outside of Atzilus, outside of the Eiris. Yeah? That's the question. In truth, we can answer this question as follows. Does it not say that the one that creates the eye shouldn't be able to see? Pirush. Since he's able to create an eye, which the eye can see, should he not be able to himself see? Not through the eye. But he doesn't need an eye to see, because he can create an eye that sees. Hakavana l'mayla. Since the Eibush is able to create the Kliyah Chochma, then for sure in the Eirin Seif, he's able to have Chochma. Says that everything is revealed and known before the Eibush made the what? It's not that it's not an active knowing. It's a yediyah which is me'elav u'me'ela. But derech me'ela he knows everything, because it's about kol yochel. He's capable of all the yediyahs. Shaloi al yedei kelim, but the yediyah that he has is not al yedei kelim. So in that way, he's not yedei b'yediyah shechutz l'atzmosei, because he already knows everything anyway. Talking in a manner of pshitus, talking in a way of yechelis, but not. It's not like he knows al yedei kelim, which then you might have your question that you have. The Rashab says, no, I'm not dying. Sorry, when we say the Gol of Yedu, we're talking about Eirin Seich Lamayla Miatzilus. If we're just going to narrow in and zoom in to the Eirin Seif, which is the Eiris of Atzilus, that Eir, where's its Yediyah from? Its Yediyah is L'cheira al Yedei HaKelim. Sheheim Hamalim Man. They're the ones. They the Kelim. Amaylim Man B'chinas Ha'Eirin Seif Mikol Ma'isa Tachtoinim. Kamish Kosim Mizel V'Kamon B'dei B'Mascha Adonah HaBeis. Ba'al L'cheira al Zeh Yakshi Yukushes HaPardes. This is the question of the Pardes. That the interaction that you have between the Eiris of Atzilus and the Kelim of Atzilus is such that the Kelim of Atzilus is the means by which the Eir operates through Outfilis, Ha'oila, Al Yedei, HaKelim, and then ideally, hopefully, V'am Shachas HaShefa from the Maila. So there's an impact from the Kelim. And if the Kelim are going to be so fundamentally different to the Eir, which this of course is never a question for the Ma'areches, right? Because side the Eir and side the Kelim are both Atzilus. But for the Rekanti who wants to make this distinction, and you understand why he wants to make this distinction. Why does he want to make this distinction? Because it solves all of his other problems. Things like Shinuyim and everything. But you're stuck with it being something in Atzilus. These Kalim are seemingly independent operators to the Eir. That's what we're going to do. See, there's Om number M as Lekoshimidi. This is really not a question. Why? We have to refine what the Rekanti is saying. Till now we've been emphasizing the fundamental difference between the Eiris and Kelim. Now we're going to create a nuance in the Kelim, according to the Rekanti. When he says Einam Bechinas Atzilus Mamish, Ein Hakavona, Shein Bechinas Bria Mamish, K'may Kol HaNivroim. He's not relegating them to be on the same par as Eilamis Bia and the Nivroim. Ella Shein gam kein Atzilus. And nicht nur das, hein Elikus mamish. They're also Elikus. They're also Atzilus. Aber nicht, as wie der Ma'areches hat gesagt. Not in the same oifen as a manner in which these Kalim and these Eiris, the Kalim is just a further tzimtzum of the Eir. Of is the same notion, same concept. Just a more mamoshistic, more mukhshirdik, more mugbuldik. But the Am is the same thing. They're both nishtalshal, milamayla. No, there's still a difference. But just because there's a difference doesn't mean we're not with the Kalim are stam aziv the nivroim, not briyesh ma'im. Even if he says briyesh ma'im, he doesn't mean briyesh ma'im mamish. We said earlier, chokhmah datzilus equal briyesh ma'im. Right? He says about the chokhmah datzilus, briyesh ma'im. Chokhmah ma'im timotze. It says ma'im timotze. It's a yesh. The Kalim is a yesh. It's a yesh lefi erech. Dim neima shehin nivroim chas v'sholim. Because there's a fundamental flaw by considering them as mamish nivroim. Then because eichem kelim ala atzilus, that would disqualify them as proper kelim for atzilus. Shai bria ena yechila lekabel eir atzilus, because we know olam bria isn't a kli for the eir of atzilus. Ukiyado but in a parsa sheben atzilus the bria. There needs to be a parsa between atzilus and bria in order that the bria is able to be makabel the ha'ara the eir which is nimshach from atzilus. We're going to get into this in mamish towards the end. Not for a long time, 50 pages time. The Eir which is nimshach from atzilus into bria is called an Eishel Tulda. The Eir has been, intimately impacted by this parsa. So how could the Kalim of Atzilus, if you're going to call them Yesh Me'ayin, if you're going to call them Briyesh Me'ayin and Ivroim, how would they be able to make up their Atzilus? If the Bria can't, then they also shouldn't be able to. We know they can. So the Rekanti can't be saying, the Pshat in the Rekanti isn't that they're like Nivroim Mamish. Rather, they're also Atzilus, and they're also Elikus. But Gamar Ramanach Rekanti Eimed the Ha'ir Hu Atzilus Mamish. Vu Anikra Boira. So he calls the Eir Boira. That's his term for Eir. And he says the Eir is Atzilus. Who mislabish ba Kalim. And this Eir is so the very fact that it's mislabish in the Kalim is Docha Raya that these Kalim are also Atzilus. Otherwise we won't be able to make up the Eir. Sham. This is what it says there. Mainly the quote from the Chayit. So since the Beira, which is his term for the Eir of Atzilus, is B'seichen Mamish, is in the Kalim, Akin Koru Shchina. That's why the Shchina is called the Shchina. Ki Beira Sheichem B'seichen. So it's Mamish klar from the Rekanti that the Eirim is mislabish and Sheira B'kli. And in them, just like the Eir is Atzilus, the Kli is also Atzilus. V'im lefi daitoy shakelim hem bria, and were the Rekanti to hold that they were taka bria, just like all the other Nivroim, v'im must be ech ya beira hu ha'eir b'seichem mamish islabish b'hem. It couldn't be, right? Elisha be'emes gam lefi das Rav Nachman Rekanti ein hakavon shakelim hem bria mamish. He means that the bria in the context and in relation to the Eir. We're going to talk about what type of bria they are, but don't confuse it to think that it's saying that it's that. Now he's going to bring a whole bunch of quotes from the Rekanti, which, to be honest, I don't understand the ACS very well, so I'm just going to skip it. If you want to read it, trying to get your head around it, I push it. To look it up to the context. The ACS don't work for me very well. So just going to go to the penultimate line in Mikolzeh. So this is the opinion of the Rekanti. Sha'kelim da Atzilus einam bria elashin gam kein Atzilus. Hein elikus mamish. So 1 second. So what's the difference? Mikol makim bechinas kelim, but they are kelim. What we need to understand now is then taking them. What's the difference? the whole first, based on the first question, we were emphasizing the difference. In order to answer the question of Shinoi, we made very clear distinction between the Eir and the Kli and differentiated them. Now, in order to overcome the question of being Yidei Yidei Shechutz Mi'atzmosei, we are reining back in the Kalim and recognizing them also having a shaykhus to the Eir to a greater degree than the way we were trying to explain it in the first question. Yeah? Okay. So let's see. What is therefore what is this notion of the Kalim according to the Rekanti? We know the union of the Kalim according to the Mareches is what? Shtalshlus. The Keich HaGvul is Nishtalshul from Atmas HaMaitzah into the Kalim. That was the Mareches' approach. The Rekanti says no. The Eir and the Kli are not the same idea, just one to a greater degree of Tzimtzum than the other, or one to a greater degree of Ishtalshus than the other. They're two separate notions. We're still stuck with them both being in Atzilus. The Eir we know is Poshet. That's clear from the Rekanti. It's an Eir, which is a Ha'ara from the Maitzel, and it's Poshet, Tachas Apshitus, even when it's Mislavish B'Kelim, it's still, there's no such thing as Eir HaChachma, there's no such thing as Eir HaChesed, there's just the Eir, which is Mechaya Kli HaChachma. There's the Eir, which is Mechaya Kli HaChesed. So what is this Kli? It's not a Nivra, because it's a Keli for the Eir of Atzilus. But it's not Eir. It's not Poshet. So what is this notion that what is the Rekanti's notion of Kelim? You understand where we are? You're following the thread? The concept is as follows. So the Lashon of the Rekanti is that mi Eirei HaGodl his noite to Akelim. The Kalim sort of sparked off. The Kalim are the mashal for Kalim is that they are sparks from the Ma'ir. B'hainu, the Oif Metzias HaKalim Eirin Seif Hu Kumei Derech Moshel HaNitzutz HaNimshach Min HaAvuka. When you have a spark which jumps out of a bonfire, fireplace, torch. HaNitzutz Hu Mehusa Eish Mamish. So this nitzutz is fire; it will burn you. But at the same time, but it is a distinct, separate entity from its mokir. And that is the difference between Eris and Kelim of Atzilus. The Eir is made a moir and stovik in the moir, like a flame would be on top of a coal. Whereas the Kalim are more like a spark, which is distinct from its sheirish. The Gam Yesh Loimar can also give another mashal. Not just like a spark, like a child who is a piece of the father. They really are a product of they're from the same thing. Whilst they may be the same essence, the parent and the child is a separate entity from the parent. You know, like people can do like DNA tests, and you can tell from a person who their parents are just by taking a test, right? So it's the same etzem, it's the same mohus, but they're separate. I don't know if we need to do some of them more from Acher. This is a whole long bracket, I think. Where it says a similar thing between the difference between Torah and the Shamas Yisrael. The Torah is has a dveikus nikeres, whereas the Shamas Yisrael have a dveikus shein nikeres.
In good sense. In good sense. They're more connected.
Who?
The Shabbos.
No, the opposite. They're Daven Nifrat. Whereas Torah is begolui, how it's olikus. That's a whole question. But Torah says Torah can have sama chaim, sama maves. Torah also says Torah is Teva Ilana Tevara. So it gives a whole. He goes backwards and forwards explaining all of those issues, and that takes you to the end of the paragraph. It's let's skip that. We're going to skip that, and we're actually going to stop there.
In the middle of a sentence.
No, I'm gonna. Why won't you? That was the beginning of the paragraph. Was it in the beginning of the sentence? Where does it say? So that's the Indian. So we have the mashal from the Rakanti of Nitzutz, and the Rashabat, the mashal of a child and a parent. Okay, but now that's just like a statement. It's not really a biur. It's stating that is the. Now the next we're gonna explain in Eisias Chassidus sort of how exactly that functions. So what is the Sheish HaKelim? What is the Sheish HaEres? And then we can appreciate the difference between them. But it's the beginning of all. The biur inyan is where we should start next time. Okay.